Hi, I'm Tony, and today we're going to learn how to quilt your quilt using straight lines with a quilt sandwich and a walking foot. First, let's talk quilt sandwiches. It is extremely important if you are quilting for the first time, before you actually quilt your quilt, practice on sandwiches. All a sandwich is a backing, a top, and batting basically basted the same exact way as your quilt that you're going to work on. Same exact fabric, which is important because you want to see how the thread and the needle react to your fabric. Same fabric, same batting, same the way that you baste your quilt. So I always pin baste, so my quilt sandwiches are basted by pins. When you are doing your basting, make sure that you do it in a way that follows along what your design is. I am just going to do 3 straight lines, 1, 2, 3. So you see I've opened up this area right here. I've basted around the corners because I want to lock in those corners first, and I'll show you that technique. If you don't know how to baste, I do have a video I've linked down below on how to baste your quilts. There's a couple of different ways. Just make sure you make your sandwiches the same way. But practice, practice, practice. Make some quilt sandwiches, and then you can come back and practice at the same time with me. Now let's talk the walking foot. So if you want to sew straight lines into your quilt, there's a couple of methods to do it. But if you don't have a ruler foot, which I will get into in a bit, please, please, please use a walking foot. This is a bit more expensive than other feet. If your sewing machine came with a walking foot, great. If not, you may have to pick one up. It is extremely important to get a good straight line because there are feed dogs on the top here as well as the feed dogs that are along the bottom. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to sew all of these different layers and not have any skipped stitches, have a nice even stitch, and be able to have it go through the machine at the same time. Walking feet are also good for other kinds of materials like leather and other such things. So make sure that today I'm going to be using this foot to do your straight line quilting. If you don't have one, I've got a link down below where you can pick one up or see if you can borrow it from a friend. If you're not quite sure about straight line quilting, see if you can borrow one before investing in one if you don't have it. But it looks like this, and there's a whole bunch of videos online about how to put this on your machine and do everything else. I'll quickly show you how to put it on your machine, but this is what we want to use for our straight line quilting today. After we do our quilting, then at the end of the stream, I'll also talk a little bit about ruler work and other ways to quilt your quilt as well, other than straight line quilting. One last thing before we actually get into putting our walking foot on our machine and doing some straight line quilting is, can your machine handle quilting? That is the question I get the most. So with straight line quilting, if your machine can go through multiple layers of fabric and you have a walking foot, chances are yes. Most machines on the market can do straight line quilting. If you have a really inexpensive machine that you may have gotten at a big box store that was maybe $50, $60, don't try it. You probably can't do it. Don't, it's maybe not be able to handle it. And it's because of the motor that's in your machine. If your machine costs at least about $100 and you have a walking foot, yeah, you can do it. The machine I'm going to be showing you today is the Brother CS6000i. I cannot free motion quilt, which is another video, but I can walking foot quilt with this machine. So it retails about $120 to $150, and it actually does come with a walking foot. I have a link to the machine down below as well if you need a little bit better machine but you don't want to break the bank on it. And it, like I said, comes with a walking foot too, which is a $50 foot. So it's maybe worth it just for the foot. Yeah, so take a look at your machine. See if it's a little bit better machine. Obviously, high quality machines, yes, you can definitely do a straight line with a walking foot. So look at your machine, and that's it. Let's get quilting. Let's get sewing. So how do we put this walking foot onto our machine? Well, first off, you have to take this thing off. So use a screwdriver and unscrew it to take it off. Okay, so completely take that piece off of your machine. Next, you want to put your walking foot on. There's a bar that you don't see that's right here. You want to take this piece right here and put it into that bar. So the bar is going to fit right into here. And you're going to put the opening right into this area here. I actually have to loosen it a bit more to get it to go in. It can be a little pain sometimes to put it on there. There we go. But the most important thing is this bar right here. You can see my piece of plastic that's kind of sneaking out. You put it right here on this bar, and then don't forget to tighten your foot up. So let's tighten this baby up a bit. There we go. Come on. Like I said, it can be a bit of a pain to put it on. Now, after you have your walking foot on, make sure your needle is in the middle position. That means, you see my needle right here? It's going to go right in the middle, right here between this walking foot. And this is important. You have a whole line right there. It's going to go right in the center. So our walking foot is on, so now we can sew. Now with all quilting, whether it's straight line quilting or free motion quilting, I like to use quilting gloves. These gloves allow for a better grip of the fabric to help move it around through the machine. So it basically grabs onto the fabric and helps move that. It's a better grip. These are my favorite pairs. They're by Swan Amity. They are made of the golf material here, so it's breathable, your hands don't sweat, they're padded, and they have the touch screen sensors. So if you're using an electronic machine, you can actually use these to also change the settings on your machine. I've got a link down below if you want to take a look at it. So, all right, so let's let's straight line quilts. What you want to do is start on the end, out here in the batting, if possible. You can start someplace in your machine if you need to, but if you do, make sure you back stitch in order to lock it in. And then, as you see here, I'm not pushing the fabric, I'm not pulling the fabric, I'm just guiding it through straight into the machine. Now I'm doing the very edge first to kind of lock that in. And I want to show you something right here. So I'm going to, actually, you know what, let's use a scrap fabric to clear it. Because I want to show you what's happened right there. Now, this is what happens with straight line quilting. You notice how this part here is farther than this part here. This is because this foot presses all the layers together and it really gives it a nice seam. So take a look at that tension for the thread for the top and the bottom. See how nice that is? So it's really making sure it's through there, but at the same time it's kind of smoothing it out as you go. If you don't base this perfectly with a nice perfect smooth, you're going to get the edges like this. So, in order to combat this, make sure that you are straight line quilting all in the same direction at all times. So my next line right here, I'm going in the same direction all the way down. And then you see here how this area, let me trim that there. You see how this area there is kind of puckered up because it wasn't quite pushed it. So what I like to do is do big lines in order to lock it in, take my pins out, and then go back and do lines in the center. So it's just a trick that I like to use so I don't get a lot of puckering when I straight line quilt. So you do one line, do another line farther down, and then you can do the line that's between them, just like that. And that is how you get those lines in there. Now, how do you keep it straight? That is the question. There's a few things you can do. There is a tutorial that I have, how to sew a straight line, different tricks and things. Some of the things you can put over here, such as the metallic, you can put in different areas. You can have different marks on here to do that. You can mark on your actual quilting. You can use cornstarch. You can use chalk. You can draw your lines, follow your lines along. There's all sorts of things that you can do. So if you're concerned about your straight lines, make sure that you take a look at those things. But remember what I said, practice, practice, practice. Practice on your quilt sandwiches. So practice to make sure your quilt sandwiches are nice and neat, and then when you're comfortable with your sandwich, then move to your quilt and add that quilting in. Now you may or may not have heard the term stitch in the ditch. What that means is that you're stitching where a seam is happening with two different fabrics. So let's say theoretically this part right here is one fabric and this part right here is another fabric, and I've sewn them together, and this line right here is the seam between them. So stitching in the ditch means you're just following along and making sure that you're sewing right on top of that seam all the way down. And what that does is it camouflages your thread so you can't quite see your quilting. You can't quite see the stitches because that is your seam. So it's an easy way to hide your quilting. If you're not quite comfortable with quilting yet, I would suggest that you do stitch in the ditch. So let's see how I did by following along. Oh, it's not bad. That's actually, I'm actually pretty happy with that. So see, it follows it right along in that ditch. So stitch in the ditch is also an option. I talked about a few different ways that you can get those straight lines if you're concerned about sewing a straight line. There's also something called ruler work, where you have a special foot that you put on your machine and then you basically follow inside of an acrylic template, which causes you to have straight lines. If you're interested in ruler work, I suggest Sew Steady. It is, or Westerly, it's also known by. It's a great company out of Australia that does amazing ruler templates. They're really nice, really easy to work with, and a way that you can get some nice straight lines. Now, you don't have to use a walking foot to use these templates. It's their own foot that they use that actually fits into the acrylic, so there's no wiggle room. There's no room for error on there. So you get those nice straight stitches. So if you're interested in that, take a look at that one as well. In the meantime, practice, practice, practice. Hopefully you learned something today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video, follow my YouTube, as well as Facebook, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, my Facebook group, Quite Nerdy Quilters, and don't forget about Twitch, where you can interact and sew with me as I sew live.